I woke up freezing to death. It was not the damp, conditioned chill of my modern design studio. This cold bit into bone, sharp and unforgiving, clinging to every inch of my skin like a living thing. I peeled my heavy eyelids open, expecting to see familiar acoustic ceiling panels and polished concrete floors. Instead, jagged black stone walls filled my blurred vision, and a massive, unshuttered window let in howling alpine wind that sliced straight through the thin fabric of my robes. I sat up slowly, my muscles stiff and aching from prolonged cold. My gaze dropped to my hands, and a sharp jolt of disbelief shot through me. These were not my hands. For 15 years, I had worked on rough construction sites, built a high-end commercial interior design firm from the ground up, and earned thick, rough calluses on every fingertip. These hands were pale, slender, and smooth, untouched by hard labor, soft as silk, belonging to someone who had never lifted a finger for survival. Panic pricked at my throat, but before I could gasp or scramble backward, a tidal wave of foreign memories crashed into my brain, sharp and overwhelming. I was no longer Elias Cross, 30-year-old interior designer from the modern world. I was Rowan Hale, the third son of a declining noble house in this brutal medieval realm. My family had sacrificed me without a second thought. Bound in cheap crimson wedding silk, I had been traded as a political hostage, gifted to the most terrifying being in the entire kingdom, Valarkale, the supreme Dark Lord of the Abyssal Vale. Valar was an undefeated warlord, a ruthless demon king who commanded an army of silent, deadly shadow assassins. His name alone made nobles tremble and commoners flee. Valar had marched off to war weeks prior, leaving the original Rowan alone in this frozen, cursed fortress. Abandoned and terrified, the frail noble boy had wept himself into a raging fever, dying alone on a cold stone bed mere seconds before my soul slipped into his empty body. I let out a quiet, shaky breath, my breath fogging visibly in the frigid air. Fine. New body, hellish situation. At the very least, I still had my brain. I still had 15 years of brutal construction logic, unshakable project management grit, and an obsessive hatred for shoddy, impractical architecture. Crying won't insulate these garbage walls. I muttered, my voice hoarse and trembling from the bitter cold. I pushed myself unsteadily to my feet, dragging a thick, tattered winter robe over my thin silk undergarments. My bare feet touched ice-cold stone flooring, and I bit back a shiver, already plotting renovations. I began to inspect my new prison, and every corner of this fortress screamed architectural negligence. Uneven slate walls leaked frigid wind nonstop. Every piece of furniture was solid raw iron, an idiotic, cruel choice for a castle perched high in the frozen alpine mountains. Metal retained cold, freezing anyone foolish enough to sit or lean against it. The draft was constant, unrelenting, and deliberately torturous. I marched toward the heavy oak double doors leading to the outer courtyard, my steps firm and deliberate despite my trembling limbs. I shoved the doors open with all my strength, and a sharp gust of snow-laden wind whipped my hair into my face. My left eye twitched violently at the sight before me. There was no garden, no greenery, no peaceful courtyard. The entire open space was a dense, menacing forest of rusted iron spikes, sharp enough to pierce armor and flesh alike. Snow dusted the jagged metal points, turning the courtyard into a cold, deadly trap built for intimidation and suffering. A faint rustle cut through the wind. A shadow detached itself silently from the wooden eaves above me. A figure landed gracefully on the snow-covered stone, not making a single sound upon impact. The man was clad head to toe in matte black combat robes, his face hidden behind a polished silver demon mask. Cold, empty eyes peeked through narrow eye slits, locked firmly on my frame. This was one of Valor's infamous shadow assassins, elite killers trained to kill without mercy, without hesitation. According to the original Rowan's memories, the mere sight of these masked guards had triggered crippling panic attacks, leaving the frail boy gasping and hyperventilating on the floor. I simply crossed my arms over my chest, tilting my chin upward with unwavering calm. My tone was crisp, authoritative, sharp with the command of a seasoned construction project manager. You. State your designation. The assassin stiffened, his entire body tensing in visible surprise. He had expected fear, tears, trembling desperation, not cold, unyielding authority. His gloved fingers hovered lightly over the hilt of the poisoned sword at his waist. Shade 7, young master. His voice was low, monotone, completely devoid of human emotion. Shade 7. I repeated evenly, unfazed by his killing intent. Answer me this. Does your dark sect hold a personal grudge against basic heating infrastructure? Silence. The masked assassin stared at me blankly, confusion rolling off his rigid frame in thick waves. He had been trained to withstand torture, execute traitors, and defend his lord. No one had ever asked him about heating. I do not understand your meaning, young master. I jerked my chin toward the gaping, unpatched window behind me, the wind howling through its broken edges. Is your supreme lord actively attempting to freeze his political hostages to death? This castle is a structural disaster. The Lord Valor does not feel the cold. Shade 7 replied mechanically, reciting a fact drilled into his mind since childhood. Well, I am a normal human being with a fully functional nervous system. I shot back, stepping closer to the deadly assassin without an ounce of fear. As your lord's legally recognized spouse and political hostage, I demand immediate structural modifications. Gather 3 capable laborers, a stack of dried pine wood, thick waterproof canvas, and a heavy iron hammer. Bring them to me now. Shade 7 hesitated, his hand tightening firmly around his sword hilt. I cannot abandon my post, young master. My duty is surveillance. I sighed heavily, channeling the stern, uncompromising tone I used on stubborn subcontractors who ignored safety regulations. If I freeze to death from hypothermia before Lord Valor returns from war, he will hold you accountable. Do you truly wish to explain to the Demon King that his precious political hostage died because you refused to fetch firewood? The logic cut through his assassin's rigidity. Shade 7 fell silent for a long moment, then dipped his head in sharp acknowledgement. He vanished into the shadows without another word, moving faster than the human eye could track. By nightfall, I had a roaring stone fire crackling in my previously useless hearth. By the end of the first week, I had sealed every leaky crack in the uneven slate walls, patched the broken windows with thick canvas insulation, and removed all rusted iron furniture to replace it with soft wool padding. By the third week, I had completely renovated the entire cursed fortress. It had taken 5 elite shadow assassins and an absurd amount of condensed martial energy to rip the thousands of rusted iron spikes out of the courtyard stone. I had them clear the jagged metal scraps, level the frozen earth, and plant dense black bamboo along the courtyard edges to block the brutal alpine wind. I tracked down a hidden natural hot spring deep within the mountain caves, redirecting its steaming water into a sunken stone bathtub built directly inside my private quarters. I even invaded the sect's gloomy, vermin-infested kitchen. Tying a plain linen apron over my expensive silk noble robes, I taught the terrified, underfed kitchen staff how to braise tender pork belly with fermented herbs and slow-simmered bone broth. The cold, tasteless ration slop they had served for years was replaced with warm, hearty meals rich in flavor and nutrition. On the quiet evening of the third week, I sat at a polished cedar table in my newly renovated courtyard. Soft bamboo leaves rustled in the gentle wind, Warm steam curled from ceramic teacups, and the harsh mountain cold was completely blocked by windproof barriers. I knew Shade 7 and 3 other shadow assassins were hiding in the wooden eaves above me. Their presence is faint but unmistakable. I could hear their stomachs growling loudly, echoing across the peaceful courtyard. Shade 7. I called out casually, not lifting my gaze from my steaming broth. The assassin dropped silently from the rafters, landing neatly on the bamboo-planked floor. He bowed his head respectfully. "Young master, sit." I patted the empty wooden chair beside me. If my top assassins faint from hunger on my rooftop, that counts as a critical structural oversight. I fix all oversights. The 4 deadliest assassins in the entire Alpine province hesitated for barely a heartbeat before lowering themselves into the wooden chairs. I gently lifted the bottom edges of their cold silver masks, exposing their sharp jawlines and tired, starved faces. None of them spoke. They simply ate, ravenous and silent, savoring the first warm, flavorful meal they had tasted in years. I leaned back in my chair, sipping warm herbal tea and observing my handiwork. The drafty, blood-soaked lair was gone. In its place stood a warm, functional sanctuary, bright, clean, and livable for the first time in the fortress's brutal history. A deep, resonant vibration suddenly rumbled through the stone ground, rippling the broth inside my ceramic cup. The 4 assassins froze instantly, their spoons clattering against their bowls. Every muscle in their bodies tensed into a lethal, guarded stance. "The war campaign has ended," Shade 7 whispered, his voice tight with ancient reverence and fear. He abandoned his half-eaten meal and vanished into the surrounding shadows in the blink of an eye. "The Supreme Lord has returned." Valerkale was home. An oppressive silence crashed over the courtyard. Every shadow in the vicinity went deathly still. I slowly stood to my feet, my calm gaze fixed on the heavy wooden entrance gates. Heavy, thunderous footsteps echoed across the outer stone pavement. Each step vibrated through the floorboards, radiating raw, brutal martial power that made the very air tremble. The temperature plummeted sharply, not from mountain cold, but from the suffocating pressure of a demon king's unbridled aura. The massive wooden doors to my courtyard were violently kicked open, splintered wood flying across the polished bamboo floor. Swirling snow drifted into the warm courtyard, carried on the back of a towering, blood-drenched figure. It was Valerkale. His thick dark fur cape was heavy with frozen ice and dried gore. Crimson blood stained his black armor, coating his gauntlets and splattering across his sharp jawline. He came to a halt at the courtyard's edge, his glowing crimson eyes sweeping slowly over my renovated sanctuary. His gaze was cold, predatory, assessing every unfamiliar detail of his transformed fortress. He took one heavy, imposing step forward. His blood-soaked iron boot landed squarely on my pristinely polished cedar threshold. A thick chunk of melting bloody snow fell from his tattered cape, leaving a greasy, dark red puddle on the wooden floor I had spent 3 exhausting days sanding, oiling, and buffing to perfection. My left eye twitched violently. All rational self-preservation vanished in an instant, completely eclipsed by the burning, unshakable rage of a homeowner staring at irreversible floor damage. "Stop right there," I snapped. Absolute, deafening silence followed my sharp command. From the hidden rafters, Shade 7 let out a tiny, almost imperceptible gasp of pure terror. No one dared speak to Valerkale that way. No one dared command the Demon King to halt. Valer froze mid-step. The undefeated warlord tilted his head slowly to the side, his crimson eyes glinting with dangerous curiosity. His voice was a deep, gravelly rumble, rough from battle and disuse. "What did you say to me?" I said, "Stop right there." I repeated firmly, grabbing a wooden broom from beside the table and pointing its handle directly at his bloodied, armored chest. "Look at your boots. You are dragging slush and fresh battlefield blood all over a floor I spent 3 perfect days polishing. Take them off. Now." For 10 agonizing, endless seconds, the entire world seemed to stop spinning. Snowflakes hung, suspended in the cold air. The hidden assassins held their breath. Valor Kale stared at me, his crimson gaze unblinking, weighing every bold, insolent inch of my frame. He took another slow, menacing step forward. His suffocating demonic aura washed over me in thick, crushing waves, pressing against my skin and threatening to buckle my knees. He lifted one large, scarred hand, his fingers rough and calloused from countless battles, stopping merely an inch away from my trembling jaw. "You are my political prisoner," he hissed, his low voice rumbling deep within his broad chest. "A useless noble sacrifice sent to rot and die within my cold halls. You belong to me." I did not flinch. I did not cower. I stared straight into his terrifying crimson eyes, my tone sharp and unyielding. "And as your legally wedded spouse, I am telling you to remove your bloodied armor and soak in the hot spring until you stop reeking of death and battlefield rot. This is a clean living space, not a slaughterhouse." I shoved a folded clean linen cloth firmly against his blood-stained chest, my movements steady and unafraid. "Take the boots off, Valor." The Demon King continued to stare at me, his powerful mind struggling to process the audacity of this frail, noble hostage. The entire courtyard held its breath. The most dangerous man in the entire martial realm stood motionless, obeying the quiet command of a boy who should have trembled at his shadow. Minutes later, the terrifying warlord was submerged neck-deep in the steaming stone bathtub I had built. I sat alone at the dark cedar table, clutching a warm ceramic teacup and forcing myself to maintain the detached, calm exterior of a seasoned project manager. Beneath my composed mask, my heart hammered violently against my ribs, pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had just scolded an undefeated bloodlord and ordered him to remove his battle gear. I should have been terrified. I should have been executed on the spot. Yet all I felt was stubborn satisfaction. The gentle splashing of hot spring water ceased. A heavy, oppressive silence flooded the bathing chamber. Then came the deliberate, slow sound of bare feet padding across smooth bamboo floorboards. Valor emerged from the steaming mist. He wore the loose dark silk inner robe I had laid out for him the previous night. The fabric hung open loosely over his broad, muscular torso, revealing a rugged landscape of silvery battle scars, old sword wounds, dagger slashes, and burn marks scattered across his chest, shoulders, and forearms. Every scar told a story of endless bloodshed and brutal conquest. His bottomless crimson eyes locked onto mine with unwavering intensity. His towering physical presence filled the small room, shrinking the warm sanctuary into a cramped, confined space. He stopped directly in front of my table, looming over me like an approaching storm cloud. "You have been busy, Rowan Hale," he rumbled, his deep voice vibrating through the wooden table beneath my palms. I took a slow, calm sip of my herbal tea, refusing to break eye contact. "Your shadow guards have informed you, I assume. They no longer spend their days sharpening killing blades," Valor stated, his tone laced with quiet disbelief. "They spend their working hours planting black bamboo and sealing wall cracks. My assassins have become laborers. A man who only sharpens blades expects nothing but bloodshed." I countered smoothly, setting my teacup down on the polished tabletop. "A man who plants bamboo expects longevity. I thought your violent sect could use a simple lesson in survival and peace." Valor leaned forward, placing both of his massive palms flat against the cedar table. His broad shoulders caged me in my wooden chair, leaving nowhere for me to run. The heat of his body rolled over me in thick waves. Longevity is a luxury reserved for the weak, he whispered, his crimson gaze piercing straight through my carefully crafted calm facade. Then blades should be stored in dry armories to avoid rusting. I shot back, pushing myself upright to meet his towering height. I lifted one finger, pointing directly at the fresh torn stitch on his left forearm, an unhealed battle wound oozing faint traces of dark blood. You tore your armor stitching. Sit down. I turned my back on the most lethal man alive without a single shred of hesitation. I crossed the warm room to grab a ceramic jar of medicinal healing paste and clean linen bandages from my storage chest. When I spun back around, Valor was staring at me as if I were a newly discovered mythical beast, unfathomable, strange, and utterly captivating. With a low huff that sounded dangerously close to a possessive growl, the Demon King slowly lowered himself into the wooden chair, obeying my quiet order. I have slaughtered entire noble clans for daring to look at me the wrong way, he murmured softly, his deep voice quiet enough for only my ears to hear. He watched intently as I gently wiped dried blood from his scarred forearm with a damp linen cloth. I have killed kings for lesser insolence than you display daily. I wrapped the bandage tightly around his healed wound, my fingers light and precise. I have fired incompetent subcontractors for leaving expensive tools out in the rain. Everyone has their own non-negotiable rules. Valor's crimson eyes darkened with unreadable emotion. He did not pull his arm away as I finished bandaging his skin. I handed him a ceramic bowl filled with steaming dark ginger infusion, brewed to soothe battle fatigue and cleanse his body of battlefield toxins. Drink this. It will calm your overworked muscles and steady your aura. He glared at the bitter liquid for a single heartbeat before tilting his head back and draining the entire bowl in one single gulp. Not a single drop spilled over his lips. Now get into bed, I ordered, nodding toward the soft cotton and silk mattress I had spent a small fortune importing. I spent a week's worth of silver buying thick insulating blankets to soften that cold stone slab. Use them properly. I grabbed a thin woven sleeping mat from the wooden storage chest, preparing to lay it on the cool bamboo floor beside the bed. Valor tracked my movements with sharp, focused eyes. Where are you going? He asked, his tone low and sharp with an unidentifiable emotion. To sleep on the floor, I replied plainly. You sustained severe battlefield injuries. You need ample open space to recover without disrupting your body's healing process. No, the single word was an absolute, unbreakable command. His crimson eyes locked onto mine, glowing faintly in the warm candlelight. You spent my silver to craft this perfect bed. You will sleep in it beside me. I opened my mouth to refuse, but Valor moved faster than the human I could register. In a single blurred motion, he crossed the small room, his large hands wrapping securely around my narrow waist. He lifted me effortlessly off the bamboo floor as if I weighed nothing more than a handful of feathers. He dropped me gently into the center of the soft plush mattress. Before I could scramble backward or roll away, he lowered his massive body onto the bed, caging me in an instant. His heavy knees bracketed my slender hips, and his broad palms pressed firmly into the silk pillows on either side of my head, trapping me completely beneath his towering frame. His dark hair brushed lightly against my cheek, his warm breath fanning across my neck. His low, rumbling voice dripped with quiet, undeniable obsession. You fixed the drafts. You warmed the cold stone. You built this safe, perfect nest for yourself, he whispered, his crimson gaze drinking in every detail of my flustered face. Now you will stay inside it with me, Rowan. You are mine. A sharp, flustered heat crawled up my neck and stained my cheeks pink. My earlier confidence wavered under his intense, predatory stare. This cold, bloodthirsty demon lord was utterly captivated by me, by my stubbornness, my obsession with renovation, my complete lack of fear toward his terrifying aura. I had transformed his hellish fortress into a warm home, and now he had no intention of ever letting me leave. I swallowed hard, my throat feeling dry. Valor, you do not have to. I want to, he interrupted, his tone firm and unyielding. He lowered his head, his forehead resting gently against mine. The brutal edge of his demonic aura softened into something warm, possessive, and tender. I have spent my entire life surrounded by blood, death, and empty cold stone. You are the first warm thing that has ever belonged to me. My heart skipped a beat. I had entered this cruel medieval world expecting nothing but suffering, captivity, and an early grave. I had planned to survive alone, renovate the castle for my own comfort, and keep my distance from the deadly Demon King. I had never anticipated capturing the cold heart of the most feared man in the realm. I lifted one trembling hand, pressing my palm lightly against his scarred cheek. His skin was cold from the mountain air, yet his body burned with the intense heat of a pure-blooded demon lord. He leaned into my touch instinctively, his sharp crimson eyes fluttering shut for a fleeting moment of vulnerability. I thought you would hate me, I admitted quietly, my voice barely louder than a whisper. I was sent here as a disposable hostage. Your people told me you detest all noble sacrifices. Valor's eyes snapped open, his gaze intense and sincere. I detest weak, cowardly nobles who beg for mercy and cling to power. I have never detested you. From the moment I first saw your name on the marriage contract, I could not stop thinking about you. I blinked in pure shock. You knew about me before the war? I monitored your every move, he confessed, his thumb brushing gently over my lower lip. I watched you seal the walls, feed my starved assassins, and rebuild my broken home. I waited to return, craving the moment I could finally meet the strange, fearless boy who dared to defy my entire cold realm. Outside the warm bedroom, snow continued to fall over the black bamboo courtyard. The hidden shadow guards stood motionless in the freezing dark, keeping watch over their transformed fortress and their newly beloved young master. The cold, brutal atmosphere of the Abyssal Vale sect had faded completely, replaced by quiet warmth and peaceful stillness. Valor slowly shifted his weight, rolling onto his side to avoid crushing my slender frame. He pulled me tightly into his scarred chest, tucking my head beneath his strong jaw. His large hand rested gently over my beating heart, his fingers splayed across my back in a protective grip. Rest, he murmured, his deep voice soft and soothing. I will keep you warm. I will never let you freeze again. I relaxed into his sturdy chest, listening to his slow, steady heartbeat. The bitter mountain cold no longer bothered me. The terrifying shadow assassins no longer frightened me. I was safe, sheltered, and cherished by the most dangerous man alive. I had transmigrated into a dark fantasy world to become a demon lord's helpless hostage husband. Instead of suffering captivity, I renovated his cursed castle and accidentally captured his cold, broken heart. And our addictive, chaotic love story was only just beginning. The morning sunlight filtered through insulated canvas windows, spilling soft golden streaks across the bamboo floor. I woke up slowly, my body heavy with peaceful exhaustion, tangled firmly in Valor's unyielding embrace. His muscular arm was wrapped tightly around my waist, his palm still pressed gently over my heart, and his broad chest acted as a constant, warm cushion beneath my head. His low, steady heartbeat rumbled against my ear, a quiet rhythmic sound that had quickly become the most comforting noise in this strange medieval world. I shifted slightly in his grip, attempting to roll onto my side without waking him. The movement was futile. Valor's hold tightened instantly, his scarred fingers subconsciously digging softly into the fabric of my robe. A low, sleepy growl vibrated in his chest, half-conscious and instinctively possessive. His cold crimson eyes remained shut, his dark messy hair falling messily over his sharp forehead, softening his usual brutal, demonic features. For a long quiet moment, I simply stared at him. Up close, without the blood and battle grime that had coated him yesterday, Valor was devastatingly beautiful in a harsh, rugged way. High sharp cheekbones, a strong square jaw, and long dark lashes that cast faint shadows over his pale skin. Every silver scar scattered across his body told a brutal story of war and slaughter, yet in this peaceful morning light, he looked less like a terrifying demon king and more like a tired, lonely man who had never known warmth. "Stop staring," he mumbled suddenly, his voice deep and hoarse with sleep. His crimson eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly even in bright daylight, locked directly on my face. There was no malice, no cold detachment, only drowsy, quiet fixation. I froze slightly, caught red-handed. "I was inspecting your scar tissue. The stitching I wrapped last night is holding well." A quiet, breathy chuckle rumbled in his chest, a rare, raw sound I had never expected to hear from the infamous Blood Lord. The corners of his cold lips tugged upward into a faint, lopsided smile, subtle enough that I might have missed it if I blinked. "Always the designer," he murmured, brushing a stray strand of hair away from my forehead with gentle, careful fingers. His touch was tender, unbearably soft, a stark contrast to his brutal reputation. "You analyze everything, don't you? Walls, floors, weapons, me. Everything needs proper maintenance to stay functional." I replied matter-of-factly, refusing to acknowledge the flutter in my chest at his gentle gesture. I tilted my chin toward his bandaged forearm. "Your body is no exception." Valor's crimson gaze darkened slightly, his eyes dragging slowly across my face, down my neck, and lingering on the faint pulse beating at my throat. The soft warmth in his aura shifted, morphing into quiet, smoldering obsession, the same heavy craving that had trapped me beneath him last night. "You are far too gentle for this cruel realm," he whispered. "Too good for a cursed fortress ruled by blood and shadow." I opened my mouth to argue, but my stomach rumbled loudly, cutting through the quiet morning air. The embarrassing sound broke the heavy, intimate tension between us instantly. Valor blinked, then let out another low chuckle, his chest vibrating against my cheek. "You are hungry," he stated plainly. "We both are," I corrected, pushing lightly against his chest to free myself from his firm embrace. He released me reluctantly, his fingers dragging slowly across my waist as I pulled away, as if he was reluctant to let go of the warmth I provided. "I'll go to the kitchen and prepare breakfast. The staff still lack proper cooking technique." "Allow my servants to handle it," Valor said, already pushing himself upright on the soft mattress. His broad muscles flexed with every subtle movement, the silver scars on his torso glinting faintly in the sunlight. "You do not need to labor for me." "Good food is not labor," I countered, slipping out of bed and onto the smooth bamboo floor. My thin silk robes brushed against my ankles, and I wrapped a thick wool shawl over my shoulders to block the faint morning chill. "Besides, your kitchen staff still burns simple stews. Someone has to fix their workflow." Valor shook his head in quiet amusement, watching me gather my bearings with unwavering attention. "You truly treat this demonic stronghold like your personal construction project." "It is my living space now," I shrugged. "I refuse to reside in a poorly maintained building, no matter which world I'm in." I left the bedroom and wandered toward the renovated kitchen, the faint scent of burning firewood and fresh bamboo drifting through the crisp morning air. The entire fortress felt different now, no longer cold, hollow, and haunted by death. Soft wind chimes hung from the courtyard eaves, crafted from polished scrap iron I had salvaged during renovations, tinkling gently in the alpine breeze. The black bamboo swayed in neat rows, blocking harsh winds and casting dappled shadows across the polished stone ground. For shadow assassins stood rigidly at the courtyard corners, their silver masks glinting in the sunlight. When they spotted me, every single one of them bowed their heads in respectful unison. It was a subtle, silent shift. Once they had watched me with cold suspicion, now they guarded me with quiet devotion. Shade 7 stood nearest to the kitchen entrance, his gloved hands clasped neatly behind his back. I paused beside him, glancing toward the empty mountain trails beyond the castle walls. "Has the outer temperature risen today?" I asked casually. "Marginally, young master," Shade 7 replied, his tone respectful and calm. "The snowfall has ceased. The mountain frost will weaken for 3 days before returning." "Perfect," I nodded. "I plan to renovate the abandoned armory on the west side later. Gather 6 workers and bring waterproof tarpaulin. The stone walls have severe water seepage." Shade 7 stiffened slightly, genuine confusion seeping into his tone. "The armory? It stores the Lord's weapons of war. It requires no renovation. Every metal weapon rusts in damp, cold air," I explained simply. "Unmaintained storage shortens blade lifespan by 40%. I'm fixing it." The assassin fell silent, clearly unable to comprehend why a noble hostage would care about the condition of a Dark Lord's killing weapons. He dipped his head in obedience regardless. "As you command, young master." I continued toward the kitchen, a faint smile tugging at my lips. These cold, ruthless assassins were slowly adapting to my modern logic, one absurd renovation order at a time. The kitchen was warm and steaming when I stepped inside. The trembling staff had grown far less fearful in the past 3 weeks, their movements steady and practiced as they chopped vegetables and stirred simmering pots. I adjusted their herb ratios, refined the fire temperature beneath the stone stoves, and instructed them to bake soft wheat bread in clay ovens while the broth simmered. By mid-morning, the wooden table was lined with warm food. Rich bone broth seasoned with wild mountain herbs, tender braised pork belly glazed with sweet honey, crusty freshly baked bread, and steamed sweet root vegetables harvested from the mountain valleys. I carried 2 full trays back to the private courtyard, fully expecting to find Valor waiting alone. Instead, I paused mid-step. The demon lord stood beside the black bamboo grove, his tall frame rigid and still. He was speaking in a low, icy tone to Shade 7, his crimson eyes sharp and cold once more, the gentle warmth from morning long vanished. I slowed my footsteps, careful not to interrupt. The cold edge in Valor's voice was a stark reminder. This tender, soft-spoken man who held me through the night was still the undefeated demon lord of the Abyssal Vale. He was still capable of unspeakable cruelty. "You reported to me that he fed you," Valor said, his tone sharp and clipped. "All 4 of you." He shared his meals with trained assassins. Shade 7 knelt respectfully on one knee, his head bowed low. "We were starving, my lord." The young master showed mercy. "Mercy is weakness," Valor hissed, his aura flickering with faint, demonic black mist. The air turned cold for a split second, the bamboo leaves trembling violently. "You are my weapons." Weapons do not eat at the same table as their master's spouse. Weapons do not grow attached. My grip tightened slightly on the wooden food tray. I understood his logic now. Valor was jealous, not of the assassins, but of the quiet loyalty I had unintentionally gained. He was accustomed to owning everything cold and unfeeling. He hated that his deadly shadows had grown fond of something warm and human, me. I stepped forward deliberately, my boots tapping softly against the bamboo planks. The second Valor heard my footsteps, his murderous aura vanished instantly. The black mist dissipated into thin air, and his sharp crimson eyes softened the moment they landed on my frame. The cold tyrant expression melted away, replaced by quiet, restrained yearning. Stop scaring my staff, I said plainly, setting the food trays down on the cedar table. Valor's jaw tightened. They are my assassins. They are people, I corrected, pulling out a wooden chair and patting the seat beside me. Sit and eat. Your battle wounds require nutrient intake. For the second time in 24 hours, the terrifying demon king obeyed me without argument. He crossed the courtyard in slow, heavy strides and lowered himself into the chair, his broad shoulders still tense with lingering possessive irritation. Shade 7 remained kneeling on the bamboo floor, his head still bowed. I waved a hand toward him casually. You and the others are free to eat in the side pavilion. I prepared extra portions. The assassin's shoulders relaxed visibly. Thank you, young master. He vanished into the shadows to gather the other 3 guards, leaving Valor and me alone in the peaceful bamboo courtyard. The demon lord stared at me silently as I sliced a piece of soft bread, his crimson gaze unblinking and intense. You are far too generous with things that belong to me, he murmured. Nothing here truly belongs to you if it rots and used, I replied, handing him a bowl of steaming broth. Food is meant to be eaten. Space is meant to be lived in. Your fortress was wasting both before I arrived. Valor accepted the bowl, his scarred fingers brushing lightly against mine. His touch lingered, warm and deliberate. And what about me? He asked quietly, his voice dropping to a low rumble only I could hear. Was I wasting away too? I paused, my throat tightening faintly. I lifted my gaze to meet his crimson eyes, seeing the raw, vulnerable truth hidden beneath his brutal exterior. He had lived in endless cold, surrounded by death and loneliness for centuries. He had never known warmth, never tasted simple peace. You were, I admitted honestly. Now you aren't. A heavy beat of silence passed between us. Valor lifted the broth to his lips, drinking slowly, his eyes never leaving my face. He ate quietly, without greed, without mess, an unnatural stillness that came from centuries of disciplined battle training. Once we finished breakfast, I wiped the wooden table clean and stood to my feet. Come with me. I'm going to inspect the West Armory. Valor raised one dark eyebrow. You wish to see my weapons? I wish to fix your weapons storage space, I corrected. Your armory is structurally unsound. Damp stone walls rust metal, and cracked ceilings let in snowmelt. It's a construction disaster. A faint, genuine smile tugged at Valor's lips. He stood slowly, his towering frame casting a long shadow over my smaller figure. Lead the way, stubborn designer. The West Armory was located at the far edge of the fortress, hidden behind thick stone walls and sealed with heavy iron gates. The moment we pushed open the rusted metal doors, a thick wave of cold, damp air washed over us. The interior was dark, gloomy, and completely devoid of heat. Rows of sharp swords, poisoned daggers, and heavy battle axes lined the stone walls, their metal surfaces dulled by accumulated moisture. Frost coated the stone floor, and faint dark mold crept along the cracked wall seams. I frowned deeply, scanning every structural flaw with my trained designer's eyes. This is unacceptable. You store priceless battle weaponry in a cold, damp cave. Weapons do not need warmth, Valor stated, leaning one shoulder casually against the stone doorway. They only need sharpness. Sharpness fades without proper maintenance, I argued, stepping deeper into the armory. I brushed my finger along a sword blade, collecting a thin layer of damp rust on my skin. Look at this oxidation. Your finest steel is decaying because you refuse to install insulation and drainage. Valor followed closely behind me, his eyes tracing every focused movement I made. No one has ever cared about the condition of my blades except my blacksmiths. I care, I said simply. I hate inefficient design. I wandered through the long weapon rows, mapping out renovation plans in my head. I would dig an underground drainage channel to remove accumulated meltwater, line the walls with waterproof clay insulation, install a low-temperature stone hearth to maintain dry air, and build polished wooden weapon racks to keep metal off the cold, damp stone floors. I would even add thin, glowing rune stones for soft lighting, replacing the dim, flickering torches that polluted the air with smoke. I want to rebuild the entire interior, I explained, turning to face Valor. Dry heat circulation, waterproof barriers, organized storage systems. Your weapons will never rust again. Valor stepped forward slowly, closing the distance between us until his towering frame loomed over me. The dim armory shadows draped over his sharp features, darkening his crimson eyes. He lifted one hand, brushing a faint strand of hair behind my ear, his touch unbearably gentle. You rebuild every broken thing you touch, he whispered. My walls, my kitchen, my cold empty courtyard, even my weapons. Will you rebuild me too, Rowan? My breath caught in my throat. The question was quiet, vulnerable, and brutally honest. He was not just a demon lord. He was a broken boy who had grown up in endless bloodshed, molded into a cold weapon by a cruel world. He was asking me to fix him. I lifted my hand, pressing my palm firmly against his cold, scarred cheek. I already am, I murmured. Valor's breath hitched. He lowered his head slowly, his forehead resting lightly against mine. The air between us grew thick and warm, charged with unspoken tension. His cold lips brushed faintly against mine, a soft, fleeting ghost of a kiss, barely there before he pulled away. It was chaste, innocent, and infinitely more intimate than any bold touch could ever be. I crave you, he admitted in a low, hoarse whisper, his crimson eyes darkening with unbridled obsession. Every passing hour, every quiet moment. I did not know longing could hurt until I met you. My heart raced wildly in my chest. I had known he was captivated by me, but I had never imagined his feelings ran this deep, this raw and unfiltered. The cold, bloodthirsty warlord was utterly, irrevocably obsessed with a modern interior designer trapped in a foreign body. Valor. I breathed his name softly. Say it again, he demanded quietly, his thumb brushing gently over my lower lip. Say my name again. Valor. The sound of his own name falling from my lips made his eyes darken further. He wrapped one arm tightly around my waist, pulling me flush against his muscular chest. The cold, hard metal of his armor plates pressed against my soft silk robes, contrasting sharply with his warm skin beneath. Do you understand what you've done to me? He muttered, his lips hovering an inch from mine. I have killed kings, burned clans, and drowned nations in blood without a single flicker of remorse. Yet one small smile from you makes my knees weak. One gentle touch makes me forget every battle I've ever fought. I tilted my chin upward, meeting his intense crimson gaze without fear. You do not have to be a monster anymore. His hold tightened possessively. I am a monster, but I am your monster. Before I could reply, a faint quiet rustle echoed from the armory entrance. Shade 7 stood frozen in the doorway, his silver mask hiding his expression, his body rigid with pure panic. He had clearly interrupted an intimate moment, and every muscle in his frame screamed regret. My lord, he whispered hastily, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the stone ground. Forgive my intrusion. The Outer Mountain Patrol reported suspicious noble movement near the fortress border. The Hale household has sent envoys. The gentle warmth in Valor's aura vanished in an instant. His crimson eyes turned sharp and icy, his jaw tightening into a brutal, cold line. The tender lover faded away, replaced by the ruthless demon king once more. The Hale household. He repeated the name with venomous disdain. The family that threw you away like broken trash. My own expression hardened. I had barely thought about my original family since transmigrating. The Hales had sacrificed their own son for political power, discarding me without a second thought. They did not deserve my sympathy. What do they want? I asked calmly. They request an audience, Shade 7 replied. They wish to bring tribute and formally acknowledge your marital bond with the Dark Lord. They beg for military protection from neighboring warring clans. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped my lips. Typical selfish nobility. They had abandoned me to die in a demon's fortress, and now they returned to leech power and protection from my powerful husband. Valor's fingers squeezed my waist tightly, his tone cold and murderous. I will send them away. They do not deserve to look upon you. I placed a gentle hand on his tense arm, stopping him before he could condemn the envoys to death. Let them enter. Valor stared at me in disbelief. They hurt you. They abandoned you. Exactly. I nodded, my gaze sharp and unyielding. I want to see them. I want them to witness exactly what they threw away. Let them watch their discarded hostage live better than every single one of them. A slow, cruel smirk tugged at Valor's lips. He admired my quiet defiance, my unshakable pride. As you wish, my stubborn, brilliant husband. He released my waist, taking a deliberate step backward to put space between us. The intimate warmth faded, replaced by cold formal authority. Shade 7. Escort the envoys to the main hall. Offer them cold bread and frozen water. Do not grant them warmth. Do not grant them comfort. Yes, my lord. Shade 7 vanished into the shadows once more. I glanced around the damp, gloomy armory, exhaling a quiet breath to steady my racing heart. I'll begin armory renovations tomorrow. Have the workers clear out all loose rust and mold before sundown. Valor nodded, his crimson eyes softening the second his gaze returned to me. Anything you want. Anything at all. It is yours. We walked side by side back toward the main castle hall, the cold mountain wind brushing against our shoulders. I knew the upcoming meeting with the Hale envoys would be unpleasant, but I felt no fear. I was no longer their disposable political hostage. I belonged to this cold demon king, and he belonged to me. We were a pair, broken, stubborn, irrevocably bound together in this renovated cursed fortress. And no selfish noble family, no bloody war, no bitter mountain cold would ever tear us apart. My fingers curled weakly into the rough fabric of his robe, every rational thought melting away beneath the weight of his burning crimson gaze. The damp, cold air of the armory faded into nothing, drowned out by the heavy heat rolling off his body. I tilted my chin upward, silently surrendering to the quiet pull between us, ready to close the tiny distance separating our lips. A sharp, urgent rustle shattered the charged silence. My lord, forgive the intrusion. Shade 7 materialized at the armory entrance, dropping to one rigid knee on the frost-covered stone. His silver mask glinted dimly beneath the rune light, and his gloved hands pressed tightly against his thighs, radiating pure panic. He knew better than to interrupt his lord's private moment, especially a moment this tender, this vulnerable. Valor's entire body locked up. A murderous, icy aura exploded off his frame in an instant, the faint black demonic mist swirling violently around his boots. His crimson eyes sharpened into bloodthirsty slits, his jaw clenching so hard the muscles in his jaw bulged. Speak. His voice was a low, dangerous growl, barely restrained from tearing the intruder apart. The Hale envoy procession has entered the outer castle gates. Shade 7 rushed out, his breath uneven. 3 noble envoys, 12 personal guards, and a cart piled high with tribute gold and exotic silks. They refused to wait in the outer pavilion and demand immediate audience in the main ceremonial hall. Irritation flashed across Valor's rugged features. His arms tightened possessively around my waist for one fleeting second, as if he intended to hide me away from the prying eyes of my cruel blood relatives. The soft warmth in his expression vanished completely, replaced by the cold, unyielding brutality of a seasoned warlord. "Insolent vermin," he muttered, his gaze sweeping over my flushed face. His thumb brushed gently over my lower lip one last time, a silent, reluctant caress before he pulled away. "I will have them thrown from the mountain cliffs." I placed a steady hand on his tense chest, holding him back from reckless destruction. My heartbeat still raced wildly in my ribs, but my tone remained calm and collected. "No, let them stay." Valor stared down at me, confusion mixing with his lingering rage. "They discarded you. They sold you like livestock for political leverage. Why grant them an audience? Because they need to see what they lost." I replied plainly, my eyes cold and sharp. "They think I am still that frail, weeping noble boy who froze in this castle. Let them witness how their disposable hostage turned their enemy's hellish fortress into a home. Let them watch you favor me. Let them regret every cruel choice they made." A slow, vicious smirk tugged at Valor's lips. He admired every sharp, unapologetic part of me, the quiet vengeance hidden beneath my calm designer's composure. "As you wish, my clever husband." He slipped one arm around my shoulders, guiding me firmly toward the armory exit. His touch was protective, possessive, an unspoken declaration to anyone who dared look. I belonged to him. "We will greet them together." We walked side by side across the castle grounds, the crisp alpine wind brushing against our robes. Valor kept me tucked firmly against his side, his broad frame shielding me from every cold gust. Wordless, subtle protection that made my chest ache with quiet warmth. The main ceremonial hall had once been the most intimidating space in the entire fortress. Tall, jagged black stone pillars lined the room. The floors were raw, unpolished rock, and cold wind whistled through endless wall cracks. I had not yet renovated this hall, leaving it in its original brutal state, a stark contrast to the warm, refined courtyard and private quarters I had rebuilt. 3 noble envoys stood rigidly in the center of the hall, their velvet silk robes embroidered with golden Hale family crests. The tallest figure was my second elder brother, Kale Hale. His sharp, arrogant features twisted with disdain as he scanned the rough, gloomy hall, his polished leather boots clicking loudly against the stone floor. The moment his eyes landed on me, a mocking sneer curled on his lips. "There he is," Kale drawled, tilting his chin upward in haughty contempt. "The family's worthless third son. The sacrificial lamb thrown to the blood demon. I half expected to find your frozen corpse rotting in some dark dungeon corner." The other 2 envoys snickered quietly, their eyes sweeping over my simple silk robes with undisguised mockery. They had dressed in extravagant embroidered finery, desperate to flaunt their noble status before the demon lord. I did not flinch. I did not react to their cruel taunts. I simply stood beside Valor, my back straight, my expression blank and unimpressed. Valor's hand tightened subtly on my shoulder. His crimson eyes glinted with murderous fury, and the temperature in the hall plummeted sharply. The torches lining the stone walls flickered violently, their flames trembling beneath his unbridled, demonic aura. "Speak one more insult toward him," Valor said, his voice low enough to send chills down every noble spine. "And I will feed your bones to my shadow hounds." Kale's smug smirk faltered. He swallowed hard, taking an involuntary step backward. Even arrogant nobility knew better than to provoke the undefeated Dark Lord. Still, he forced his confidence to remain intact, clearing his throat loudly. "We come bearing tribute for the abyssal veil," he announced, gesturing toward the heavy gold cart parked at the hall entrance. "Gold, silks, and rare medicinal herbs. In exchange, we request military protection from the northern rebel clans. Our family also comes to retrieve our bloodkin." "Retrieve him?" Valor cut him off, a cold, humorless laugh rumbling in his chest. He is not your property to reclaim. You threw him away. Now he is mine. I stepped forward slightly, breaking the tense silence. My tone was calm, factual, void of any childish anger or emotion. The tribute is insufficient, I stated flatly. Your gold is impure, your silks are low-grade woven fabric, and half your medicinal herbs are wilted and contaminated. This offering would not even satisfy my kitchen staff, let alone the Dark Lord. Kale's eyes widened in shock. You insolent boy, how dare you judge noble tribute? You know nothing of trade or nobility. I know craftsmanship, I corrected, tilting my head slightly. I know material quality, structural value, and wasted potential. Your gifts are cheap, rushed, and disrespectful, just like your family's last-minute plea for protection. Valor's lips twitched upward into a proud, subtle smile. No one had ever dared to humiliate the haughty Hale nobles so effortlessly. Furthermore, I continued, glancing around the drafty ceremonial hall, your noble manor's structural design is flawed. Poor drainage, thin exterior walls, and zero wind insulation. You mock this castle while residing in a far less refined estate. Your arrogance is misplaced. The envoys fell dead silent. They had expected a trembling, obedient hostage. Instead, they found a sharp, unyielding man who judged nobility the same way he judged crumbling stone walls. Kale's face flushed bright red with rage and humiliation. You have lost your mind. You are nothing but a demon's spoiled pet. And you are a man who throws his own blood to monsters for gold. I retorted coldly. I would rather be a spoiled pet than a cowardly noble who sacrifices family to survive. Valor raised one hand, cutting the argument short. His crimson gaze swept over the pale, trembling envoys with icy disdain. Take your tainted tribute and leave my lands, he ordered. The Abyssal Vale offers no military aid to a house that abandons its own kin. If you set foot on my mountain again, you will not leave alive. Panic flashed across the nobles' faces. They stumbled over their own feet, scrambling to grab their card of worthless tribute. Kale shot me one last venomous glare before fleeing through the hall doors, his shoulders hunched in shameful defeat. The heavy stone doors slammed shut behind them, leaving the hall quiet and empty once more. Valor turned to face me, the murderous coldness fading from his eyes. He reached up, brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear, his touch unbearably tender after the brutal confrontation. You did not flinch, he murmured, even when they insulted you. They are not worth my energy. I shrugged. I have renovations to finish. Wasting time on petty nobles is poor project management. Valor laughed again, a deep, genuine sound that echoed through the empty stone hall. He pulled me into his chest, wrapping both arms tightly around my waist, burying his face in the crook of my neck. His cold breath fanned against my skin, sending faint shivers down my spine. Mine, he whispered reverently, like a prayer. All mine. The unkissed touch from the armory still lingered between us, thick and burning. I knew that sooner or later, the fragile tension would snap. And when it did, there would be no more interruptions, no more hesitant glances. Only him, and me, in the warm, renovated fortress we had made into home. The cold draft swirling through the ceremonial hall brushed over our intertwined bodies, but I felt nothing besides the searing warmth of Valor's arms wrapped around me. The rough, unpolished stone beneath our feet, the jagged black pillars looming in the dim torchlight, the lingering bitter chill left by the departing nobles. None of it mattered. In this bleak, untouched hall that I had yet to fix, the only thing I could register was the steady thud of Valor's heart against my back, strong and unyielding beneath his thin silk robe. He held me tighter for a long, quiet moment, as if anchoring me to his side, as if afraid I might vanish along with the hateful echoes of my blood relatives. his nose buried deeper into the crook of my neck, inhaling the faint scent of mountain herbs and clean linen that clung to my skin, a quiet, possessive habit he had picked up in the short time we'd spent together. I let my hands rest loosely against his forearms, feeling the raised texture of his old scars beneath my fingertips, no longer cold and foreign, but familiar and safe. The rage that had simmered in his bones moments ago had faded completely, melting into a soft, insatiable tenderness reserved solely for me. No cruel noble, no fleeting interruption, no cold, empty hall could dim the quiet fire burning between us. He lingered in the embrace for a long while, unwilling to pull away, as if the faint warmth of my body could mend the endless loneliness carved into his soul. The flickering torches cast distorted, soft shadows on the rough black stone walls, wrapping us in a secluded bubble away from the rest of the world. I could feel the restrained restlessness hidden beneath his calm demeanor, the unspent longing that had been cut short in the damp armory, amplified by the irritation of the rude, noble interruption. My fingers traced the rugged ridges of his scarred forearms slowly, silently soothing the quiet turmoil swirling inside him. When he finally lifted his head from my neck, his crimson eyes were dark and smoldering, clouded with an emotion too raw and intimate to name. Without a single word, he slipped one hand beneath my knee and lifted me effortlessly into his arms, his movements gentle yet unshakably possessive. The cold ceremonial hall faded behind us step by step, and the distant howl of the mountain wind became nothing more than a faint, irrelevant murmur. There would be no more interruptions today. He carried me silently through the winding stone corridors of the fortress. The cold, unrenovated passageways echoed with the steady thud of his footsteps, every distant torch casting wavering amber shadows over the rough-hewn walls. All the harsh cold of the ceremonial hall faded against the warmth of his chest, and the faint lingering scent of smoke and iron clung gently to his silk robe. His grip on my thigh was firm but careful, never rough, as if he was terrified of breaking the fragile warmth he held in his arms. I rested my head on his shoulder, my fingers loosely curled against the hard muscle of his bicep, watching the empty corridors blur past us. No guards dared to appear in our path. The entire fortress seemed to hold its breath, sensing the quiet, consuming longing between its lord and me. Every trivial interruption, every annoying distraction from the outside world was left far behind. For the first time since we had met, there was nothing to disrupt us. No envoys, no duties, no noisy assassins. There was only him, only me, and the slow, quiet walk toward our private quarters. Every hollow echo of his footsteps reverberated softly through the desolate stone corridors, each slow step stretching out the quiet tension lingering thickly between us. I could feel the faint thrum of his demonic power beneath his skin, a low, dormant vibration held tightly under restraint. He did not hurry. There was no rush, no urgency. Only the unhurried pace of a man savoring every quiet second with the person he cherished. His fingers stroked slow, idle circles against my thigh through the thin silk fabric of my robe, a mindless, possessive touch that sent soft shivers crawling across my skin. The distant torch flames flickered dimly, gilding the sharp edges of his jaw and casting deep shadows over his smoldering crimson eyes. I knew exactly what he craved, what had been stolen from us twice in one day. The gentle, unrushed kiss that had been broken apart by cold interruptions and tedious trivialities. The long, empty corridors blurred into muted streaks of rough stone and warm amber light, and I surrendered myself completely to his hold, no longer resisting the quiet pull binding our souls together.